The plane touches down in Seattle, but chaos erupts as Malik, Nia, Jordan, and Aaliyah Jackson stumble off, dazed, into a frenzy of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. Security hauls a weeping Vanessa Reed away, fired mid-flight just 7 minutes ago for kicking them off their seats. She'd smirked then, smug in her power, but now she's broken. A routine Atlanta trip turned into a racist nightmare that'll haunt them forever, and it's only the start. What flipped this flight into a scandal? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like, subscribe, and join us for more gripping tales. How did this explode? Malik Jackson adjusted his backpack as he stepped onto Flight 891, the hum of the engines vibrating through the jet bridge at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. At 38, he was a software engineer with a quick mind and a steady hand, his dark eyes scanning the narrow aisle ahead. Beside him, Nia, his wife of 15 years, guided their kids through the crowd, her nurse's instincts keeping her calm despite the bustle. Jordan, 12, clutched his phone, already filming the plane's interior with a grin, his short braids bouncing as he moved. Aaliyah, 8, clung to Nia's hand, her wide eyes darting around, a small stuffed bear tucked under her arm. They'd saved for months for this Seattle vacation, splurging on business class seats, a rare treat confirmed at the gate just 20 minutes ago. Malik felt a flicker of pride as they reached row 6, settling into the plush seats, the faint scent of leather mixing with jet fuel. Nia buckled Aaliyah in, her fingers moving with practiced ease, while Malik stowed their bags overhead, his tall frame stretching to fit the cramped space. Jordan plopped down by the window, peering out at the tarmac where ground crew scurried, under the late afternoon sun, 92 degrees Fahrenheit baking the asphalt below. The cabin buzzed with passengers finding their spots, a mix of chatter and rustling bags filling the air. Malik pulled out his laptop, ready to tweak a coding project during the 5-hour flight, while Nia adjusted her glasses, flipping through a medical journal she'd brought along. Aaliyah kicked her feet, humming softly, her bear bouncing on her lap. It was a moment of quiet excitement, the kind that settles in before a journey takes off. But that peace shattered fast. A shadow loomed over them, sharp and uninvited. Malik glanced up, meeting the steely gaze of a flight attendant, her crisp navy uniform stretched tight across her shoulders. Vanessa Reed, her name tag read, stood, with arms folded, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, her lips a thin slash of disapproval. Something about her posture, rigid and commanding, set Malik's nerves on edge. Nia noticed it too, her hand pausing mid-page, her brow furrowing. Slightly, Vanessa's eyes flicked over them, lingering on Jordan's phone, Aaliyah's bear, Malik's laptop, as if cataloging every detail with disdain. "Tickets. Now," Vanessa snapped, her voice slicing through the cabin's hum like a blade. The words weren't a request, they were an order, clipped and cold, dripping with impatience. Malik blinked, caught off guard, but kept his cool. He'd dealt with enough subtle slights in his life to know when something was off. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the printed boarding passes, their business class status bolded in black ink. "Here you go," he said, handing them over with a steady hand, his tone even but firm. Vanessa snatched them, her fingers brushing his with a deliberate roughness, her nails painted a stark red. She held the tickets up, squinting at them under the overhead light, her jaw tightening as she scanned the details. The seconds stretched, her silence heavy, and Malik felt Nia shift beside him, her breath catching slightly. Jordan lowered his phone, his grin fading, while Aaliyah stopped humming, her small hands gripping her bear tighter. Vanessa let out a short, sharp breath, almost a scoff, and thrust the tickets back at Malik, not bothering to meet his eyes. "These don't look right," she said, her voice low but laced with a smug edge. "Move to economy." The words hit like a slap, blunt and final, no room for discussion. Nia sat up straighter, her journal slipping to her lap. "Excuse me?" she said, her tone calm but sharp, her years of handling hospital chaos kicking in. "We paid for these seats. Business class. The gate agent confirmed them." Her words were measured, but her eyes burned, daring Vanessa to argue. Malik nodded, backing her up. "There's no mistake here, check again." Vanessa's smirk widened, a flicker of something cruel glinting in her pale blue eyes. "I don't care what you paid for," she said, stepping closer, her shadow swallowing the light above them. "These seats are for business class passengers. You're in the wrong place. Move to the back or I'll call security." The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Her hand already hovering near the radio clipped to her belt. Malik's stomach twisted, a familiar anger bubbling up, the kind he'd felt too many times before, in boardrooms, stores, streets. He clenched his jaw, keeping it locked, knowing a raised voice would only feed her game. Naya's hand brushed his arm, a silent signal to stay steady, but her own fingers trembled slightly, betraying the fury she held back. Jordan frowned, his voice cutting through the tension. "Why us? Everyone else is sitting fine." His question was simple, direct, but it carried the weight of a kid starting to see the world's edges. Vanessa's head snapped toward him, her smirk faltering for a split second before hardening again. "Because I said so," she shot back, her tone venomous, daring him to push further. Aaliyah shrank into her seat, her bare pressed to her chest, her small voice barely audible. "Daddy, do we have to?" Malik's heart clenched, but before he could answer, Vanessa leaned in, her breath hot and sour. "Now, or you're all off this plane." The cabin went quiet, a ripple of unease spreading through the rows. Heads turned, eyes peeked over seatbacks, some passengers staring openly, others pretending to fiddle with their phones or magazines. A white couple 2 rows ahead settled into their own business class seats, unbothered, unnoticed by Vanessa. A businessman in a pinstripe suit glanced over, then looked away, his lips pursed like he'd tasted something bitter. No one spoke up. No one questioned why this family with valid tickets was being singled out. The weight of those silent stares pressed down on Malik, a mix of curiosity and cowardice he'd seen too often. Nia's eyes met his, a flash of confusion turning to resolve. They weren't here to beg, but they weren't about to be bullied either. Malik took a slow breath, his mind racing. He could fight this now, demand a supervisor, risk escalation in a confined space with his kids watching, or he could move, regroup, and hit back smarter. Nia's nod was subtle, her decision mirroring his. "Fine," he said, his voice low, controlled, but carrying an edge that promised this wasn't over. He stood, towering over Vanessa for a moment, his 6'2" frame casting a shadow back at her. She didn't flinch, her smirk holding firm, a silent victory in her eyes. Nia unbuckled Aaliyah, her movements quick but gentle, while Jordan grabbed his bag, his jaw tight, his phone still in hand. They stepped into the aisle, Malik leading, Nia behind with Aaliyah, Jordan bringing up the rear. The walk to economy felt like a mile, every eye in the cabin tracking them, some with pity, others with indifference. A woman in a floral dress whispered to her husband, her words lost in the engine's hum, but her frown said enough. A teenage girl snapped a quick photo, her thumbs already flying over her screen. Malik kept his head high, his shoulders squared, refusing to let Vanessa see him bend. Nia's grip on Aaliyah's hand was firm, her face a mask of calm, but inside, something burned, a fire stoked by years of slights piling up to this moment. Jordan's sneakers scuffed the carpet, his silence louder than any protest. His phone angled to catch Vanessa's smug retreat back to the front. At the back, they found seats in row 32, a cramped corner near the galley, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and jet fuel. Malik slid into the window seat, Nia beside him, the kids squeezed in next. Aaliyah's bear fell to the floor. She scrambled for it, her small hands shaking. "Why'd she do that, Mommy?" she asked, her voice trembling. Nia pulled her close, smoothing her hair. "Some people just don't see us right, baby," she said, her words soft but heavy. Jordan stared out the window, his fingers tapping his phone, already plotting something. Malik leaned back, his mind churning, his burned pride fueling a plan. This wasn't the end. Up front, Vanessa smoothed her uniform, her smirk fading into a mask of professionalism as she greeted other passengers, her voice suddenly warm, her smile practiced. The contrast stung, a slap of hypocrisy Malik couldn't unsee. But in first class, a man in a sleek gray suit lowered his phone, his sharp hazel eyes tracking the Jacksons' forced march. Victor Langston, 45, lean and polished, tapped, his screen, his fingers steady, his expression unreadable. He'd seen everything, heard every word, and now he dialed a number, his voice a low murmur lost in the cabin's hum. "We've got a problem on 891, he said, his tone calm but precise. "Let's make it interesting." The call ended, and he leaned back, a faint smile curling his lips, a predator sizing up prey. The Jacksons had no idea what was coming, but the trap was already set. Malik Jackson slumped into the tight economy seat, row 32, the stale air pressing against his chest like a weight he couldn't shake. The hum of Flight 891's engines rattled through the thin walls, a constant reminder of the 5-hour haul ahead. Nia sat beside him, her arms wrapped around Aaliyah, who clutched her stuffed bear like a lifeline, her small face still pinched with confusion. Jordan, squeezed against the window, glared at his phone, his thumbs hovering over the screen, his 12-year-old mind already spinning. The sting of their forced march from business class burned fresh, Vanessa Reed's smirk etched into Malik's memory. He pulled out his phone, the screen's glow cutting through the dim cabin light, and opened a text thread with Jamal, his lawyer cousin back in Atlanta. "Boarded fine. Flight attendant just kicked us to economy. Tickets were good. What's my move?" he typed, his fingers steady despite the anger simmering beneath his skin. Nia leaned over, her voice a low whisper, her breath warm against his ear. "We can't let this slide, Malik. Not in front of the kids." Her eyes, sharp behind her glasses, locked onto his, a fire flickering there, fueled by years of nursing patience through chaos and fighting her own battles. She shifted Aaliyah's weight, smoothing the girl's hair, her touch gentle, but her jaw tight. "I'm okay, Mommy," Aaliyah mumbled, her voice small, but her grip on the bear tightened, her knuckles paling against her brown skin. Malik nodded, his resolve hardening. He'd spent his life coding solutions to problems, outsmarting systems, and he wasn't about to let some power-tripping flight attendant write their story. Jordan glanced over, his voice cutting through the quiet. "She's up there laughing, Dad. I saw her." His words were a spark, igniting Malik's next move. He stood, his 6'2" frame unfolding in the cramped space, his shadow stretching across the aisle. The cabin buzzed with low chatter, passengers settling in, oblivious or unwilling to care about the drama that had just unfolded. Malik's sneakers hit the carpet, each step toward the front a drumbeat of purpose. Nia watched him go, her hand resting on Jordan's shoulder, a silent signal to stay put. Aaliyah peeked over the seatback, her bear's button eyes mirroring her curiosity. Malik reached row 6, where Vanessa stood, her back to him, fussing with a tray of water cups, her blonde bun glinting under the lights. Her posture screamed control, her movements clipped and precise, like she owned the plane and everyone in it. He cleared his throat loud enough to turn heads nearby. "I need to speak to your supervisor," he said, his voice firm, steady, a blade wrapped in calm. Vanessa spun around, her pale blue eyes narrowing, her smirk twisting into something sharper, more dangerous. "You need to sit down," she snapped, stepping closer, her radio crackling faintly at her hip. "Or you're off this plane before we even take off." Her words were a shove, meant to push him back, but Malik didn't budge. He towered over her, his presence a quiet storm, his hands loose at his sides but his gaze locked on hers. "We paid for those seats," he said, each syllable deliberate. "You moved us for no reason. I want someone above you to explain why." The cabin hushed, a ripple of tension spreading. A woman in row 8 paused her movie, earbuds dangling, her eyes flicking between them. A man in a polo shirt 2 seats over shifted, his phone lowering, curiosity winning out. Vanessa's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat, before she doubled down, her voice dropping low, venomous. "I don't explain myself to you. Sit down." She reached for her radio, her red nails flashing, but before she could press it, a deep voice cut through from the galley. "What's the problem here? Captain Paul Grayson stepped out, his graying hair tucked under a pilot's cap, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. His hazel eyes darted from Malik to Vanessa, taking in the scene with a practiced calm. Vanessa straightened, her smirk sliding back into place, but her shoulders stiffened, a crack in her armor. "This passenger's causing a disturbance," she said, her tone smooth now, professional, like she hadn't just humiliated a family. Malik didn't flinch. "No disturbance," he said, meeting Paul's gaze. "She forced us out of business class. Our tickets are valid. Check the manifest." He pulled the boarding passes from his pocket, holding them out, his hand steady as stone. Paul took them, his brow furrowing as he scanned the details, his lips pursing slightly. Vanessa shifted, her arms crossing tight, her confidence wavering. The captain tapped his tablet, pulling up the flight roster, his fingers moving fast across the screen. Seconds ticked by, the cabin's silence thickening, every eye on the trio. Paul's head tilted, his jaw tightening as he read. "Row 6, seats A through D," he muttered, then looked up at Vanessa, his voice flat. "They're booked here, paid in full. Why'd you move them?" Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting to the side, searching for an out. "There. Must have been a mix-up," she stammered, her smirk gone, her voice thinning. "The tickets didn't look right." Paul's stare hardened, cutting through her excuse like glass. "Didn't look right?" he echoed, his tone low, dangerous. "You didn't check the system?" She swallowed, her hands twitching at her sides, no answer ready. Paul handed the tickets back to Malik, his nod sharp. "Take your seats, now." Then he turned to Vanessa, his voice dropping to a growl. "Apologize. Mean it." Vanessa's face flushed, a red heat crawling up her. Her lips pressing into a thin line. She turned to Malik, her eyes blazing with something dark, but her voice came out small, forced. "Sorry," she muttered, barely audible, her gaze flicking to the floor, then back up, venom still simmering beneath the word. Malik didn't respond, just nodded once, his victory quiet but real. He walked back to row 32, signaling Nia and the kids. They rose, Aaliyah clutching her bear, Jordan pocketing his phone with a smirk of his own, Nia's shoulders relaxing, just a fraction. The cabin erupted in soft cheers, a scattering of claps from row 10, a whistle from row 15, passengers finally waking up to the win. Malik settled back into row 6, Nia beside him, the kids reclaiming their spots. Aaliyah giggled, her bear bouncing again, the tension easing from her small frame. Jordan leaned over, whispering, "We got her, Dad." Malik ruffled his hair, a faint smile breaking through his guarded expression. Nia squeezed his hand, her voice low. "Good call." The plane taxied toward the runway, the engines roaring louder, the promise of takeoff humming through the seats. For a moment, it felt like justice, like they'd beaten the system that tried to push them down. The world outside blurred past the window, Atlanta's skyline fading into dusk. 78 degrees Fahrenheit now, cooling as night crept in. But up front, Vanessa stood by the galley, her hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. Her apology had been a choke, a bitter pill she'd spat out. And now her eyes burned, locked on the Jacksons from across the cabin. She smoothed her uniform, her movements jerky, her smirk replaced by a scowl that promised payback. She'd lost this round, humiliated in front of everyone, her authority cracked wide open. But she wasn't done, not by a long shot. In first class, Victor Langston watched it all, his sleek gray suit crisp against the leather seat, his phone resting on his knee. His hazel eyes followed Vanessa's retreat, then flicked to the Jacksons, a predator's patience in his stare. He dialed a number, his voice a whisper, smooth and cold. "This isn't over, make it messy." The line clicked off, and he leaned back, his faint smile widening, a chess player moving his next piece. The Jacksons had won a battle, but the war was just heating up. "Hey folks, what do you think? Comment 1 if you're cheering Malik's stand against Vanessa's nonsense, or 2 if you think she's got no business running a cabin like that. If you're fired up for justice, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next twist. This family's fighting back, and it's only getting wilder. What's Vanessa plotting now that she's been knocked down a peg? Could Victor's call flip this whole flight upside down? Stick around to find out. Malik Jackson leaned back in his business class seat. Row 6, the soft leather cradling his tense frame as Flight 891 climbed to 35,000 feet. The cabin lights dimmed, casting a faint glow over the hum of passengers. Settling in, the air cool at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Nia adjusted her glasses beside him, her medical journal open again, her fingers steady despite the lingering heat of their earlier win. Jordan tapped his phone, scrolling through the video he'd shot of Vanessa's forced apology. A sly grin tugging at his lips, his 12-year-old defiance simmering. Aaliyah doodled on a napkin, her bear propped against the armrest, her small hums blending with the engine's drone. For a moment, the Jacksons breathed easy, the sting of Vanessa Reed's humiliation fading into the background, their reclaimed seats a quiet triumph over her petty power play. The Atlanta skyline was long gone, swallowed by clouds, and Seattle felt closer, a promise of escape from the mess they'd left behind on the ground. But peace didn't last. Vanessa emerged from the galley, her navy uniform crisp, her blonde bun tighter than ever, her movements deliberate as she pushed a drink cart down the aisle. Her pale blue eyes locked onto Malik, a glint of something feral flashing in them, her earlier defeat fueling a hunger for revenge. She stopped at row 6, her cart rattling softly, and reached for a coffee pot, steam curling from its spout. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice syrupy, too sweet to trust. Malik glanced up, wary, but nodded. "Black, thanks." She poured, her red nails glinting under the light, her smirk twitching as she tilted the pot. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she slipped, dumping the scalding liquid across Malik's lap. He jolted upright, a sharp hiss escaping his teeth as the heat seared through his jeans, pain exploding across his thighs. The cup clattered to the floor, splashing Nia's shoes, the bitter stench filling the air. "Oops," Vanessa said, her tone dripping with mock surprise, her smirk widening into a full sneer. "Should have stayed in the back where you belong." The words cut deeper than the burn, a raw, racist jab that hung in the cabin like smoke. Nia dropped her journal, her hands flying to Malik, her nurse's instincts kicking in. "Hold still," she said, grabbing napkins, blotting the spill, her voice tight with fury. Jordan's phone snapped up, filming Vanessa's gloating face, his jaw clenched, his voice low. "You did that on purpose." Aaliyah shrank back, her bear tumbling to the floor, her wide eyes darting between her dad and the woman towering over them. Passengers nearby gasped, a ripple of shock spreading, heads turning, whispers buzzing. A woman in row 5 clutched, her purse, her mouth agape while a guy in a baseball cap 2 seats over muttered, "What the hell?" Malik gritted his teeth, pain pulsing through his legs, but his eyes stayed locked on Vanessa, his anger a coiled spring. "You think that's funny?" he said, his voice low, dangerous, each word a challenge. Vanessa leaned in, her breath sour, her smirk unshaken. "I think you're out of your league," she hissed, her radio crackling faintly at her hip. Nia whipped out her own phone, snapping a photo of Malik's soaked, reddening jeans, the evidence stark against the seat. "This is assault," she said, her tone icy, her years of dealing with hospital bullies sharpening her edge. She turned to Jordan. "Post it. Now." Jordan's thumbs flew, uploading the image to Twitter with a caption, "Flight attendant. Burns my dad on purpose. Justice for Jacksons." The post shot out into the digital ether, a spark ready to ignite. A young flight attendant, Sarah Miles, darted from the galley, her brown ponytail bouncing, her green eyes wide with alarm. At 24, she lacked Vanessa's rigid authority, her hands trembling as she clutched a stack of towels. "Let me help," she said, shoving past Vanessa, who stumbled slightly, her smirk faltering. "Get out of my way," Vanessa snapped, shoving Sarah hard into the cart, the metal clanging as Sarah caught herself, wincing. Passengers murmured louder now, a man in row 7 standing halfway, his voice gruff. "Hey, back off her." Vanessa ignored him, her focus locked on the Jacksons, her control slipping but her spite doubling down. Malik pushed the towels away, standing despite the pain, his 6'2" frame towering over her again. "Get the captain," he said, his voice a command, his burned thighs screaming with every move. Vanessa's eyes flashed, her hand darting to her radio before Malik could finish. She pressed the button, her voice shifting to a panicked pitch. "Security, row 6. Passenger assaulted me." The lie rolled off her tongue smooth as silk, her smirk twisting into a mask of fake distress. Malik froze, his breath catching, the accusation a gut punch. Nia stood too, her phone still in hand, her voice rising. "That's a damn lie! You burned him!" Jordan kept filming, his hands steady, capturing Vanessa's performance, Aaliyah's soft whimpers a haunting soundtrack. Sarah backed away, her face paling, her whisper barely audible. "She's lost it." The cabin tilted as the plane leveled. Off. The seatbelt sign flicking off, but no one moved, all eyes on the unfolding chaos. Footsteps pounded from the rear, 2 air marshals charging down the aisle, their black vests stark against the cabin's muted tones. The taller one, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut, barked, "Step back!" His partner, shorter but wiry, reached for his cuffs, his gaze fixed on Malik. "You're coming with us," he said, his tone flat, final. Nia stepped in front of Malik, her 5'6" frame a shield, her voice fierce. "He didn't touch her. She attacked him." Vanessa crossed her arms, her smirk returning, her lie taking root. "He lunged at me," she said, her eyes glinting with triumph. The marshals hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing the shorter one's face, but the taller one grabbed Malik's arm, twisting it behind his back. Pain flared anew, the burn and the grip a double assault, but Malik stayed calm, his mind racing for a way out. Passengers stirred, a woman in a floral top whispering, "That's not right," her husband nodding beside her. A teenage boy in row 9 lifted his phone, filming too, the scene multiplying across screens. Jordan's post was already gaining traction, retweets piling up, outrage brewing online. Nia shoved her phone at the marshals, the photo of Malik's burned lap glowing bright. "Look at this! She's the one who assaulted him." The shorter marshal glanced at it, his brow furrowing, but the taller one yanked Malik harder. "We'll sort it later," he growled, pulling him toward the galley. Aaliyah sobbed, "Daddy!" her voice piercing the tension, Nia's arms wrapping around her tight. Jordan's camera stayed steady, his whisper fierce. "They're not winning this." Up in first class, Victor Langston watched it all, his sleek gray suit unruffled, his hazel eyes glinting with cold amusement. He leaned toward Vanessa as she slipped past, her smirk faltering under his stare. "Good move," he whispered, his voice smooth, conspiratorial. "I'll handle the captain. Keep them down." She nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face, her ally secured. Victor tapped his phone, texting fast, his fingers a blur. "Paul's a pushover. Twist the story," he sent, the message pinging to an unknown number. He pocketed the device, his faint smile curling wider, a puppet master tightening his strings. The marshals dragged Malik away, the galley curtain swinging shut behind them, Nia's furious glare burning through the fabric. The plane droned on, but the Jacksons' fight was spiraling into something darker, something Vanessa and Victor were betting they couldn't survive. Malik Jackson stumbled as the air marshals shoved him through the galley curtain, the coarse fabric brushing his burned thighs, each step a jolt of pain that radiated up his spine. The narrow crew area smelled of burnt coffee and disinfectant, the air chilly at 62 degrees Fahrenheit, a stark contrast to the heat still searing his skin. His wrists ached under the tight grip of the taller marshal, a buzz-cut brute named Hayes, whose meaty hand twisted Malik's arm higher, forcing a grimace he refused to voice. The shorter one, Ruiz, trailed behind, his wiry frame tense, his dark eyes flicking nervously between his partner and the galley's steel counter. Vanessa Reed's lie. "He assaulted me," echoed in Malik's head, a venomous trap snapping shut, and he knew this wasn't just her spite anymore. It was bigger, uglier, rooted in the kind of racism that didn't need proof, only prejudice. Beyond the curtain, Nia's voice rang out, sharp and unbroken, cutting through the cabin's stunned hush. "He didn't do anything. She burned him. Let him go." Her words were a lifeline, fierce and defiant, but the marshals didn't flinch. Hayes yanked Malik against the counter, his broad shoulders blocking the exit, his growl low. "Stay still, or this gets worse." Malik's 6'2" frame strained against the hold, his mind racing, coding a way out like he'd debugged 1,000 programs. He stayed calm, his breath steady, his voice even. "Check the manifest." "My tickets were good." "She's lying." Ruiz hesitated, his hand hovering near his radio, but Hayes barked, "Shut it!" and snapped cuffs onto Malik's wrists, the cold metal biting into his skin. The curtain rustled, and Nia pushed through, her 5'6" silhouette a storm of fury, Jordan and Aaliyah clinging to her shadow. Jordan's phone stayed up, filming every second, his 12-year-old hands steady despite the chaos, his braids swinging as he angled for a clear shot. Aaliyah's small sob broke the air, her bear dangling from one hand, her wide eyes locked on her dad. "Daddy, no!" she cried, and Nia pulled her close, her arm a shield, her other hand clutching her own phone, the photo of Malik's burn glowing bright. "Look at this," she shouted, shoving it toward Ruiz. "She poured coffee on him. You're arresting the wrong person." Hayes smirked, a cruel twist of his lips, and waved her off. "Step back, lady, or you're next." Passengers beyond. The curtains stirred, their voices rising, a chaotic chorus cutting through the engine's drone. A woman in a green sweater stood, her voice trembling but firm. "I saw it! She spilled it on purpose!" A bearded man in row 10 nodded, his phone out too. "He didn't touch her. This is bullshit." The murmurs swelled, a tide of outrage rippling through the cabin. 68 souls packed tight at 35,000 feet, their eyes piercing the galley's thin divide. Vanessa hovered near the curtain, her blonde bun glinting, her smirk faltering as the crowd turned. She smoothed her uniform, her red nails flashing, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "He's dangerous. I was defending myself." The lie thickened, a desperate bid to bury her shame from the captain's earlier smackdown. Sarah Miles slipped through the chaos, her brown ponytail askew, her green eyes wide with panic. She clutched a folded paper, the flight manifest, her hands shaking as she darted past Vanessa, who lunged to snatch it. Sarah dodged, her shoulder slamming into the cart, and pressed the paper into Nia's free hand, her whisper urgent. "She's lying. It's all here. Use it." Nia's fingers closed around it, her gaze snapping to Sarah's, a silent pact forming in the split second before Hayes roared, "Enough!" He shoved Malik toward a crew jump seat, the metal frame clanging. As Malik hit it, his burned legs buckling briefly, Ruiz snapped the cuffs to a rail, locking him in, his voice low. "Just stay quiet, man." Malik's jaw tightened, his eyes burning into Vanessa, who retreated behind the marshals, her smirk creeping back, a predator sensing blood. He tested the cuffs, the steel unyielding, his mind spinning for leverage. Nia unfolded the manifest, her voice rising as she faced the marshals. "Row 6, seats A through D. Paid in full, he's not the problem here." She thrust it at Ruiz, who took it, his brow furrowing as he scanned the printout, the truth glaring back in black ink. Hayes snatched it from him, crumpling it in his outstretched fist, his growl dismissive. "Doesn't change what she said." The lie held, a wall of bias Malik knew too well. The kind that turned facts into noise when skin color was the judge. Jordan's phone buzzed, his screen lighting up with notifications. His post from minutes ago, Vanessa's coffee attack, exploding online. "It's got 10,000 views already," he whispered, his voice a mix of awe and fury, his thumbs hovering, ready to drop more fire. The hashtag #MarJustice for Jackson's trended, retweets piling up, a digital roar echoing beyond the plane's sealed hull. Passengers peeked at their own screens, a woman in row 12 gasping, "It's all over Twitter." The cabin tilted, a faint shudder as the plane hit mild turbulence. But the real storm brewed inside, 68 witnesses turning from bystanders to a fractured army. Nia seized the moment, stepping toward the aisle, her voice booming. "You saw what happened. Tell them." The bearded man stood, his phone raised, his voice rough. "He didn't touch her. Let him go." The green sweater woman joined, her hands trembling. "She's the one who attacked him." A teenage girl in a hoodie nodded, her fingers flying over her screen, live tweeting the standoff. The marshals shifted, Ruiz's eyes darting to the growing unrest, But Hayes doubled down, his hand on his taser, his growl loud. "Back off, all of you." Vanessa edged closer, her smirk widening, her radio crackling as she muttered, "They're losing it." The passenger's defiance flickered, a spark threatening to blaze, but the marshal's authority loomed, a heavy boot ready to stomp it out. In first class, Victor Langston slipped from his seat, his sleek gray suit gliding through the shadows, his hazel eyes glinting with cold calculation. He met Vanessa near the galley's edge, his voice a whisper, smooth as ice. "I'll handle. The captain. Keep this going." She nodded, her relief palpable, her allies' power a lifeline. Victor ducked into a crew nook, his phone pressed to his ear, his tone clipped. "Paul, it's me. We've got a situation. Twist it." The line hummed, a faint reply crackling back, and Victor's faint smile curled tighter, his fingers pocketing the device. He returned to his seat, his posture relaxed, a chess master watching his pawns fall into place. Naya rallied the passengers, her voice a clarion call, the manifest raised like a flag. "They're lying to you! Help us stop this!" The bearded man stepped into the aisle, his fists clenched, his voice booming. "Let him out!" The green sweater woman joined, her phone filming, her shout trembling. "This isn't right!" The teenage girl tweeted faster, her followers spiking, the cabin's unrest surging. Aaliyah clung to Nia, her sobs muffled, her bear pressed to her chest while Jordan's camera stayed steady, his whisper fierce. "We've got proof." The intercom crackled, a sudden burst of static slicing through the noise, and every head turned. "This is your captain," Paul Grayson's voice began, calm but heavy, a verdict hanging in the balance. Malik tested. The cuffs again, his burned thighs throbbing, his hope flickering as the passenger's chant grew. "Let him go! Let him go!" But Victor's shadow loomed, a storm about to break. Malik Jackson sat rigid in the crew jump seat, the steel cuffs cutting into his wrists, the burn on his thighs a pulsing ache that matched the pounding in his chest. The galley's fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across, the cramped space, the air stale at 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The marshals, Hayes and Ruiz, loomed nearby, Hayes' broad frame blocking the curtain, Ruiz's wiry hands twitching near his radio. Beyond the thin fabric, Naya's voice still echoed, rallying passengers, her fierce cry, "Let him go!" A lifeline Malik clung to, even as the intercom's static crackled, silencing the cabin. Captain Paul Grayson's voice rolled through, calm but heavy, a judge delivering a sentence. "This is your captain. We're releasing Mr. Jackson due to conflicting reports, but he'll remain in economy for the safety of this flight." Malik's breath caught, a flicker of hope igniting, only to twist into dread as Paul continued. "His behavior was disruptive. We apologize for any inconvenience." The words landed like a fist, a betrayal sharper than Vanessa Reed's scalding coffee. Hayes grunted, unlocking the cuffs with a rough yank, his smirk smug as he muttered, "Back where you belong." Malik rubbed his wrists, his 6'2" frame unfolding slowly, pain shooting through his legs. But his eyes burned, locked on the curtain. Ruiz stepped aside, his gaze dropping, a hint of unease in his silence. Malik pushed through, stepping into the aisle, the cabin's 68 pairs of eyes snapping to him. Nia stood in row 6, Aaliyah clinging to her leg, Jordan's phone, still filming, his 12-year-old defiance unshaken. The manifest trembled in Nia's hand, proof of their right to those seats. But Paul's voice had just rewritten the truth. Passengers murmured, a mix of relief and confusion. The bearded man in row 10 frowning, the green sweater woman whispering, "That's not what happened." Paul emerged from the cockpit, his graying hair tucked under his cap, his broad shoulders stiff, his hazel eyes avoiding Malik's. "Take your family to the back," he said, his tone flat, final, a man who'd flipped from ally to enemy in minutes. Nia's jaw tightened, her 5'6" frame a wall of fury. "You saw the manifest," she said, thrusting it toward him, her voice cutting through the hum. "You made her apologize. Why are you lying now?" Paul's lips pursed, his hand, waving her off. "It was misread. You're staying in economy. End of discussion." The lie was blatant, a slap of systemic racism. the kind that turned evidence into dust when power flexed. Malik stepped beside Nia, his voice low, steady. "You're covering for her. Why?" Paul didn't answer, his gaze flicking to the galley, where Vanessa lurked, her blonde bun glinting, her smirk creeping back. The marshals herded them toward row 32, Hayes' hand hovering near his taser, Ruiz trailing with a grimace. Nia scooped up Aaliyah, her bear dangling, her small voice trembling. "Why's he mad at us, Mommy?" Jordan pocketed his phone, his braids swinging as he muttered, "Because we're winning." Malik led the way, his burned jeans sticking to his skin, his pride a quiet fire. Passengers watched, some shifting uncomfortably, the teenage girl in the hoodie still tweeting, her screen a blur of outrage. The family settled into the cramped seats, Aaliyah on Nia's lap, Jordan by the window, Malik beside them, his mind racing. Victor Langston's call had reached Paul, a whisper from the top twisting justice into a knot. And now they were split, humiliated again, the cabin's brief rebellion snuffed out. Vanessa strutted past, her navy uniform crisp, her red nails flashing as she leaned close, her breath sour against Nia's ear. "You don't belong up here," she hissed, her smirk a blade, her victory reclaimed. Nia's hand clenched the manifest, her voice a whisper of steel. "We'll see about that." Vanessa laughed, a short, cruel sound, and moved on, her authority restored, her spite a living thing. Jordan tapped his phone, his voice low. "Wi-Fi's out. They cut it." Malik's stomach sank, their digital lifeline severed. The online storm silenced mid-flight. The plane droned on, clouds blurring past at 500 miles per hour. But inside, the air thickened, a trap tightening around them. In first class, Victor Langston reclined, his sleek gray suit pristine, his hazel eyes glinting with satisfaction. He'd dialed the airline's COO, his old college buddy, minutes ago, his voice smooth as he'd said, "Paul's on board, make it stick." The reply had been a grunt of agreement, a power play sealed with a handshake years in the making. Victor sipped a scotch, the ice clinking softly, his faint smile a predator's grin. He'd turned the captain, flipped the narrative, and buried the Jacksons deeper, all from the comfort of seat 1A. The Wi-Fi cut was his touch, a gag on their growing support, a chess move to keep them isolated at 35,000 feet. Malik leaned back, his burned thighs throbbing, his mind spinning for a counter. He'd outsmarted systems before, coded his way through chaos, and he wasn't done. Nia's eyes met his, her fury mirroring his own, her whisper fierce. "They're scared of us. That's why they're doing this." Aaliyah buried her face in Nia's chest, her bear pressed tight, her voice muffled. "Why do they hate us, Mommy?" The question broke Malik, a crack in his armor, his daughter's innocence, colliding with the world's ugliness. Nia smoothed her hair, her voice soft but ironclad. "They don't hate us, baby, they're just wrong." But her eyes told Malik the truth. This was hate, raw and systemic, and it wasn't letting go. Jordan's fingers tapped the armrest, his mind churning, his 12-year-old grit unshaken. "I've got an idea," he whispered, his voice a spark in the dark. He glanced around, spotting a passenger in row 30, a lanky guy with a buzz cut and a backpack, fiddling with a burner phone. Jordan leaned over, his voice low. "Hey man, can I borrow that?" The guy raised a brow, then shrugged, sliding it over. "Knock yourself out, kid." Jordan grinned, a flicker of triumph, and started typing, uploading clips from his own device, bypassing the Wi-Fi blackout. The hashtag #JusticeForJacksons flared anew, a digital ember reigniting views, spiking as the world tuned back in. The cabin settled, a fragile calm masking the storm beneath. Passengers glanced back, some with pity, others with guilt, the bearded man rubbing his neck, the green sweater woman staring at her lap. Vanessa patrolled the aisle, her smirk a crown, her power flexing with every step. Paul retreated to the cockpit, his broad shoulders slumping slightly, a man who'd sold his spine for a quiet flight. Victor watched from first class, his scotch glass empty, his faint smile unwavering, a puppeteer savoring his strings. Malik squeezed Nia's hand, his voice a vow. This isn't over. She nodded, her resolve a mirror, her whisper a blade. Not by a long shot. Aaliyah's sobs faded, her bear a shield, but her question lingered, a wound that wouldn't heal. Jordan's burner phone buzzed, a flood of notifications lighting the screen, the world waking up to their fight. Nia tucked the manifest into her bag, her mind plotting, her nurse's calm masking a growing storm. Malik flexed his wrists, the cuff marks red against his skin, his software engineer's brain already debugging this mess. They'd been pushed down again, their brief win snatched by a captain's cowardice, but the fire in their eyes burned brighter, a promise of payback. Victor's shadow stretched long, his call a noose tightening, and Vanessa's gloat was a dare they'd answer. The plane flew on, but the Jacksons were done bending. Hey folks, what's your take on this twist? Comment 1 if you think Paul's a spineless sellout for flipping on the Jacksons. Or 2 if you're rooting for Nia to tear this whole scam apart. If you're raging at this injustice, hit that like button and subscribe to catch every brutal turn. These folks are fighting a rigged game and it's only getting nastier. What's Jordan's burner phone about to unleash? Will Vanessa's smirk last when the world fights back? Stay tuned for the explosion. Malik Jackson shifted in the cramped economy seat, row 32, the burn on his thighs a dull throb under his soaked jeans, the cabin air a chilly 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Flight 891 droned on at 35,000 feet, the hum of the engines a steady pulse beneath the tension coiling around him. Nia sat beside him, Aaliyah curled in her lap, the girl's bear pressed tight to her chest, her small breaths uneven from earlier tears. Jordan hunched over the borrowed burner phone, his 12-year-old fingers flying across the screen, his braid swaying as he uploaded clip after clip of Vanessa's assault and Paul's betrayal. The Wi-Fi blackout had cut their lifeline, but this workaround, a lanky passenger's spare device, lit a spark in the dark, the hashtag #CharJustice for Jacksons roaring back to life. Malik's wrists ached from the cuffs, his 6'2" frame cramped, but his mind burned, plotting a counterstrike against the system that kept kicking them down. Jordan's screen flared with notifications, a flood of retweets and views piling up. The post from the coffee attack now at 50,000 hits and climbing. "It's going crazy, Dad," he whispered, his voice a mix of awe and grit, his eyes glinting with a defiance beyond his years. Nia leaned over, her glasses slipping slightly, her nurse's calm masking a growing fury. "How many?" she asked, her hand smoothing Aaliyah's hair, her touch a steady anchor. "Over 1 million impressions," Jordan said, his grin sharp, a kid wielding a weapon he barely understood. The world outside was waking up, their stories spreading like wildfire, a digital uprising against the racism pinning them in these back row seats. Malik squeezed Nia's shoulder, his voice low. "They can't silence this." Passengers stirred, their whispers threading through the cabin, a quiet rebellion brewing among the 68 souls on board. The bearded man in row 10 slipped, a note to the green sweater woman in row 12, who passed it back to a teenage girl in a hoodie, her thumbs still tweeting despite the blackout. The note reached Nia, a crumpled scrap reading, "We're with you, keep fighting." She unfolded it, her lips twitching upward, a flicker of hope in her storm-dark eyes. Malik caught the exchange, his chest tightening, a crack in the wall of apathy that had held since Atlanta. The lanky guy in row 30, the phone's owner, leaned over, his buzz cut glinting under the lights. "Saw your kid's post," he said, his voice gruff. "She's a psycho. You've got my support." Nia nodded, her whisper fierce. "Thank you." Sarah Miles slipped through the aisle, her brown ponytail frayed, her green eyes darting nervously as she clutched a crew radio, a small black box with a blinking red light. She knelt beside Malik, her voice a hushed rush. "I could get fired for this, but here." She pressed it into his hand, her fingers trembling, her loyalty a gamble against Vanessa's wrath. Malik took it, his software engineer's brain already decoding its potential, his nod a silent pact. "You're risking a lot," he said, his tone heavy with gratitude. Sarah's lips quirked, a faint smile breaking through. "It's right." She darted back to the galley, her shadow vanishing as Vanessa's navy uniform loomed closer. her red nails flashing, her smirk a warning. Malik flipped the radio on, static crackling as he found an open channel, his voice steady, commanding, cutting through the plane-wide system. "This is Malik Jackson in row 32. They're lying because we're black. Vanessa Reed burned me with coffee, framed me for assault, and Captain Grayson's covering it up. We paid for business. Class, and they forced us back here. Don't let them win." The words boomed, a thunderclap in the cabin, every head snapping up, 68 pairs of eyes wide with shock. Nia's breath caught, her hand gripping his, her pride a quiet flame. Jordan's grin widened, his burner phone filming the fallout. Aaliyah's small gasp muffled against her bear. The cabin erupted, a roar of fury shattering the silence, passengers leaping to their feet, their voices a chaotic symphony. The bearded man bellowed, "That's the truth! Let them up front!" The green sweater woman stood, her phone raised, her shout trembling. "She attacked him, I saw it!" The teenage girl tweeted faster, her followers spiking, her voice piercing. "This is insane!" A man in a polo shirt banged his tray table, his growl loud. "Give them their seats!" The lanky guy in row 30 pumped his fist, his yell raw. "Screw this cover-up!" The cabin tilted, a faint shudder as the plane hit turbulence, but the real storm raged inside, a mob forming, their outrage a living thing. Vanessa stormed, forward. Her smirk gone, her face flushing red as she ripped the radio from Malik's hand, her nails scraping his skin. "Shut up!" she screamed, her voice cracking, but it was too late. The fire was lit. Victor Langston jolted upright in first class, his sleek gray suit creasing, his hazel eyes narrowing as the rebellion flared. He tapped his phone, his voice a hiss into the receiver. "Paul, divert to Boise. Now, we're burying this there." The reply crackled back, a tense, "Copy that," and the plane banked sharply left, the horizon tilting outside the windows, passengers lurching in their seats. Victor's faint smile vanished, his fingers drumming the armrest, his plan shifting to crush this uprising before it hit Seattle. The cabin lights flickered, the seatbelt sign flashing on, a mechanical voice droning, "Return to your seats." But no one listened, their fury drowning it out. Nia stood, her 5'6" frame a pillar, her voice booming over the chaos. "They're scared of us. Don't back down." The passengers surged, some crowding the aisle, others banging armrests, their chants swelling. "Justice! Justice!" A rhythm that shook the hull. Vanessa retreated, her radio dangling, her eyes wild as she shoved past Sarah, who stumbled into the galley wall, wincing. The plane's nose dipped, the descent abrupt, Boise's small airport a trap Victor was setting, a place to silence this storm before it spread. Malik gripped the seat, his burned thighs screaming, his mind racing. "They're running," he muttered, his voice a vow, his hope flickering but alive. Vanessa spun back, her fury exploding, her arm swinging as she shoved Nia hard into a serving cart, the metal clanging, cups crashing to the floor. Nia caught herself, her glasses askew, her breath sharp, her hand flying to her side where pain bloomed. "You're done," Vanessa snarled, her red nails clawing the air, her control slipping as the passengers roared louder. Aaliyah screamed, "Mommy!" her bear dropping, her small hands reaching, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jordan lunged forward, his burner phone steady, his voice fierce. "Got that too, lady." The clip uploaded instantly, the world watching Vanessa's meltdown, the hashtag spiking to 2 million views, a viral bomb detonating mid-flight. Malik pulled Nia back, his arm around her, his burned legs trembling but his resolve iron. "We're okay," he said, his voice steady, a lie to calm Aaliyah, whose sobs shook her small frame. The plane descended fast, the altimeter dropping, Boise's lights glinting faintly below, a cage Victor was locking them into. Passengers kept chanting, their phones flashing, their defiance a wall Vanessa couldn't breach. Sarah hovered near, the galley, her face pale, her whisper lost in the noise. "This is bad." The cabin rocked, the landing gear whining, the trap closing. But the Jacksons stood firm, their fleeting win from Paul's retreat now a war cry. Victor's shadow loomed larger, his diversion a desperate bid to bury them, but the world was watching. And the Jacksons weren't going quietly. The plane jolted as its wheels kissed the tarmac, a rough thud echoing through Flight 891's hull, the cabin lights flickering in Boise's dim evening glow, 68 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Malik Jackson gripped the armrest, in row 32, his burned thighs screaming under his soaked jeans, the pain a relentless pulse sinking with his racing heart. Nia sat beside him, her side bruised from Vanessa Reed's shove, her glasses steady despite the chaos. Aaliyah, trembling in her lap, the girl's bear lost somewhere in the aisle. Jordan clutched the burner phone, his 12-year-old fingers poised, his braids still as he tracked the descent, the hashtag, Justice for Jacksons, now at 3 million views, a wildfire he'd fanned into a global blaze. The plane slowed, taxiing, toward a small terminal, Victor Langston's trap snapping shut. But the Jacksons' fight burned brighter, fueled by the passengers' chants still ringing in their ears. The cabin shuddered to a stop, the seatbelt sign blinking off. But before anyone could move, the forward door slammed open, a rush of cool air flooding in. 4 Boise cops stormed aboard, their black uniforms stark against the muted seats. There, boots pounding the carpet, guns holstered but hands twitching near them. The lead officer, a barrel-chested man with a gray buzz cut named Kessler, barked, "Malik Jackson, where is he?" His voice cut through the hum, a threat wrapped in authority, his pale eyes scanning the rows. Malik stood, his 6'2", frame unfolding slowly, pain shooting through his legs but his voice steady. "Right here. What's this about?" Kessler's lip curled, a sneer of contempt. "Threat reports. You're coming with us." Nia surged up, Aaliyah clinging to her, her 5'6" silhouette a shield as she stepped into the aisle. "He's done nothing. Look at this." She thrust her phone forward, Jordan's video of Vanessa's coffee attack playing loud, the burn stark on Malik's jeans, the lie exposed. Kessler barely glanced, his hand waving it off, his growl low. "Move or you're all in cuffs." The second cop, a lean woman with a tight ponytail, grabbed Nia's arm, twisting it hard, her voice sharp. "Back off now." Nia winced, her breath catching, but she yanked free, her fury a live wire. Jordan filmed it all, his burner phone steady, his whisper fierce. "They're lying too." Passengers erupted, their phones flashing, a chaotic chorus of outrage drowning the cops' commands. The bearded man in row 10 stood, his voice booming. "He's innocent. You saw the video?" The green sweater woman joined, her shout trembling. "Leave them alone!" The lanky guy in row 30 raised his fist, his yell raw. "This is a setup!" The teenage girl in the hoodie streamed live, her followers spiking, her voice piercing. "Cops framing them now." The cabin tilted into chaos, 68 souls defying the law, their screens a multiplying army. Vanessa hovered near the galley, her blonde bun glinting, her smirk twisting into a grin as she leaned toward Victor, whispering, "They're done." Victor nodded, his sleek gray suit pristine in first class, his hazel eyes cold as he watched the arrest unfold. His phone, silent now, his orders already in motion. He'd diverted the plane to Boise, a small hub where his COO pal's influence stretched, a place to bury this mess before Seattle's spotlight hit. The cops advanced, Kessler's hand clamping Malik's shoulder, his grip iron as he yanked him forward. "Move it," he snarled, shoving Malik toward the door, the other 3 fanning out, their presence a wall. Nia lunged, blocking them, her voice a roar. "You're not taking him." The lean cop grabbed her again, cuffing her wrists with a snap, her glasses slipping as she struggled, Aaliyah's scream piercing the air. "Mommy!" Jordan and Aaliyah were torn away, the third cop, a stocky man with a shaved head, herding them toward the galley, his growl harsh. "Kids, with me," Aaliyah sobbed, her small hands reaching for Nia, her bear gone, her world crumbling. Jordan resisted, his burner phone slipping into his pocket, his voice sharp. "Let us go." The cop shoved him hard, his shoulder slamming into the wall, pain flashing across his face but his grit held. The fourth cop, a wiry rookie, dragged Nia after Malik, her cuffs rattling, her defiance unbroken. Passengers live-streamed it all, the bearded man shouting, "This is wrong!" The green sweater woman wept, her phone shaking, the lanky guy pounding his seat, the teenage girl's stream hitting 1,000,000 views mid-flight's end. The cops hauled Malik and Nia off the plane, the jet bridge a cold tunnel, Boise's terminal looming small but menacing, a trap of concrete and glass. Jordan and Aaliyah were marched to a holding room, a stark box with peeling paint and a single flickering bulb, 65 degrees inside. The stocky cop loomed over them, his shaved head gleaming, his sneer cutting deep. "Your kind always causes trouble," he spat, his words a racist lash, his hand resting on his belt, a threat unspoken. Aaliyah shrank into Jordan, her sobs, muffled, her 8-year-old frame trembling. Jordan's jaw clenched, his 12-year-old mind racing, his voice low. "You're the trouble." The cop laughed, a harsh bark, but his eyes flickered, a crack in his bravado. Malik outside tested his cuffs, his burned thighs a fire he ignored, his software engineer's brain clicking through options. The jet bridge's steel walls echoed with Nia's shouts, her voice a beacon as Kessler dragged him toward a squad car. He twisted, his 6'2" strength surging, slipping his wrists free with a coder's precision, the cuffs clattering to the floor. Kessler spun, his hand flying to his gun, but Malik ducked behind a pillar, his breath sharp, his mind locking, onto a plan. Nia saw it, her eyes flashing, her own cuffs still tight as the lean cop yanked her forward, her defiance a silent cheer. Passengers crowded the plane's windows, their phones pressed to the glass, filming Malik's escape, a spark reigniting their fury. Sarah Miles slipped through the chaos, her brown ponytail loose, her green eyes wide as she darted off the plane, her crew badge dangling. She spotted Malik crouching low, his shadow blending with the jet bridge's gloom. "I've got a plan," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm, her loyalty a lifeline. She pulled a keycard from her pocket, a staff access pass, her hands steady despite the risk. "Holding room's that way. Get your kids." Malik nodded, his gratitude a quiet weight, his burned legs protesting as he followed her lead, the terminal a maze of danger and hope. Nia's voice faded behind. Him, her cuffs rattling, her fight unbroken as the cops dragged her on. Victor watched from the plane's door, his sleek suit a stark silhouette, his hazel eyes narrowing as Malik vanished, his plan fraying at the edges. He muttered to Vanessa, his voice cold. "Fix this, or we're both sunk." She nodded, her smirk faltering, her red nails digging into her palms, her gloat turning to panic. The passengers' live stream surged, the bearded man's feed hitting 2 million, the green sweater woman's tears viral, the lanky guy's fist pump a rallying cry, the teenage girl's stream a global scream. Boise's trap was closing, but Malik's escape cracked it open. A fleeting wind snatched from Victor's jaws. The terminal loomed, cops swarming, Nia cuffed, the kids cornered, but Sarah's keycard gleamed, a slim chance in a tightening noose. Malik Jackson crouched behind a baggage cart in Boise's terminal, his burned thighs throbbing under his soaked jeans, the air sharp at 64 degrees Fahrenheit, a faint whiff of jet fuel lingering. Sarah Miles knelt beside him, her brown ponytail frayed, her green eyes darting as she clutched the staff keycard, her breath quick and shallow. The jet bridge echoed with Nia's fading shouts, her cuffs rattling as cops dragged her away, while Jordan and Aaliyah were trapped in a holding room, a racist cop sneer their only company. Malik's 6'2" frame tensed, his software engineer's mind mapping the maze of corridors, his heart pounding to reach his kids. Sarah pointed left, her whisper urgent. "Holding room's 50 yards that way. Move fast." He nodded, his gratitude a silent pulse, and they bolted, his burned legs screaming with every step, the terminal's dim lights casting long shadows over their path. They slipped past a security checkpoint, Sarah swiping the keycard, the lock clicking open with a soft beep, her crew badge bouncing against her chest. The corridor narrowed, a sterile tunnel of white walls and buzzing fluorescence, the faint hum of Flight 891's engines fading behind them. Malik's sneakers squeaked on the tile, his breath ragged, his focus locked on the holding room's steel door, 20 yards ahead. Sarah trailed, her voice a hiss. "That cop's a jerk. Be ready." They reached the door, her keycard flashing. Green, and Malik shoved it open, the hinges creaking, his frame filling the threshold. Inside, Jordan stood by Aaliyah, his 12-year-old grit a shield, her 8-year-old frame trembling, her bear gone, tears streaking her face. The stocky cop spun, his shaved head glinting, his sneer twisting as he stepped forward, his hand on his belt. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked, his voice a racist lash, his bulk blocking the kids. Malik didn't hesitate, his 6'2" strength surging as he lunged, slamming the cop into the wall, the plaster cracking under the impact. The cop grunted, his elbow swinging, catching Malik's jaw, pain flaring, but Malik held firm, his burned thighs a fire he ignored. "Get away from my kids," he growled, his voice a blade, his arm locking the cop's throat. Sarah darted in, grabbing a chair, her swing wild but true, cracking it across the cop's back, his knees buckling, his growl turning to a wheeze as he crumpled, out cold. Jordan grabbed Aaliyah, his burner phone slipping from his pocket, his voice sharp. "Dad, you're here." Aaliyah ran to Malik, her small arms wrapping his leg, her sobs muffled. "Daddy, he was mean." Malik scooped her up, his burned jeans sticking to his skin, his jaw throbbing, but his eyes soft. "I've got you, baby." Sarah barricaded the door with the chair, her hands shaking, her whisper fierce. "We've got minutes before they notice." Malik nodded, his mind clicking, his family a heartbeat he'd fight to keep. They retreated to a corner lounge, a small nook with a busted vending machine and a flickering screen. 66 degrees inside, a temporary fortress in Victor's trap. Outside, the terminal erupted, airport security swarming, their radios crackling with Victor's orders, his voice a cold thread from the plane. "They're fugitives now. Lock it down." 6 guards in gray vests stormed the corridor, their boots pounding, their shouts echoing. "Jackson family, surrender!" Malik braced the lounge door with a table, his burned legs trembling, his 6'2" frame a wall as the first guard slammed against it, the wood groaning. Sarah wedged a chair under the knob, her voice a gasp. "They're coming hard!" Jordan darted to the screen, his 12-year-old tech savvy sparking, his fingers prying its casing, hot-wiring it with a vending machine cord, his grin sharp. "I've got this." The screen flared to life, Jordan's burner phone syncing, his clips uploading live, a global plea blasting out. "We're trapped in Boise. Cops framed us. Help." The hashtag #Justice for Jackson spiked to 5 million views, the world watching. Retweets flooding from London to Tokyo. Outrage a tidal wave. Malik held Aaliyah tight, her small frame shaking, his voice steady. "You're safe now." Sarah peeked through a crack, her eyes wide as guards battered the door, their fists a drumbeat, their shouts raw. "Open up or we're breaking in." Vanessa stormed up, her navy uniform crisp, her blonde bun glinting, her red nails clawing the air as she screamed, "They're animals! Get them!" Victor's plan deepened, his sleek gray suit a shadow on the jet bridge as he dialed his COO. "Pal," his voice ice. "Plant something, drugs now." A guard slipped away, returning with a baggie of white powder, his gloved hands stuffing it into the Jacksons' abandoned bags on the plane, the frame-up a lethal stroke. Passengers watched, their phones filming, the bearded man's stream hitting. 3 million. The green sweater woman's tears a viral cry. The lanky guys shout a rallying call. The teenage girl's feet a global scream. The lounge door buckled, a guard's shoulder splintering it, and tear gas flooded in. A choking cloud stinging Malik's eyes, his burned thighs afire as he coughed, his 6'2" frame staggering. Jordan hacked faster, his voice a rasp, through the gas. "It's live. They see us." The screen flickered, the world's eyes on their siege, protests erupting outside Boise's terminal, a crowd forming, their chants faint but growing. Aaliyah wailed, her small lungs seizing, her hands clawing Malik's shirt, his arm a shield as he pulled her close, his voice breaking. "Hold on, baby." Sarah gagged, her ponytail swinging as she stumbled, her keycard useless now, her loyalty, a cost she'd pay. The guards breached, their batons raised, their gray vests a wall as they stormed in. Kessler's buzz-cut silhouette leading, his sneer a promise of pain. "You're done, Jackson," he roared, his fists swinging, clipping. Malik's shoulder, pain exploding, his burned legs buckling. Malik fell, his 6'2" frame hitting the floor, gas choking his lungs, his vision blurring as Aaliyah's screams faded, her small hand slipping from his. Jordan lunged, his 12-year-old fury a spark, shoving a guard, his burner phone clattering, its feed cutting out, the world left blind. Sarah tackled Kessler, her slight frame no match, her scream lost as he threw her off, her head cracking against the vending machine, blood streaking her brow. Nia's voice pierced the chaos from outside, her cuffs rattling, her shout a lifeline. "Malik! Kids!" The guards swarmed, their batons swinging. Malik's burned thighs afire as he crawled, his hands reaching for Aaliyah, her small form coughing, fading, a victory snatched by Victor's frame-up. Vanessa strode in, her smirk a crown, her red nails glinting as she kicked Jordan's phone, its screen shattering, her voice a hiss. "You're finished." The gas thickened, a white haze swallowing the lounge, passengers' live streams the only echo, their outrage a distant roar as Boise's trap closed. Malik collapsed, his lungs burning, his 6'2" strength failing, Aaliyah's small hand limp in his, Jordan's defiance silenced, Sarah's gamble lost. Victor watched from the jet bridge, his hazel eyes cold, his faint smile curling, his drugs a noose tightening, the siege a checkmate he'd rigged. The world raged, but the Jacksons teetered on the edge, their fight a flicker in a storm about to break. Malik Jackson coughed violently, his burned thighs a searing agony as he dragged himself across the lounge floor, the tear gas a thick fog clawing at his lungs, the Boise terminal's air a bitter 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Aaliyah lay limp beside him, her 8-year-old frame trembling, her small gasps a knife in his chest, her bear lost to the chaos. Jordan crouched nearby, his 12-year-old hands scrambling for the shattered burner phone, his braids matted with sweat, his defiance flickering through the haze. Sarah Miles sprawled against the vending machine, her brown ponytail tangled, blood trickling from her brow where Kessler's throw had split her skin, her green eyes dazed but alive. The lounge door hung splintered, 6 gray-vested guards storming in, their batons raised, their boots pounding the tile. Kessler's buzz-cut silhouette towering as he roared, "On your feet, Jackson!" Malik's 6'2" frame staggered, upright, his lungs burning, his burned jeans sticking to his skin as he shielded Aaliyah, his voice a rasp. "Leave my kids alone." Kessler's baton swung, cracking against Malik's ribs, pain exploding, his knees buckling, but he caught himself, his software engineer's grit a steel core. Jordan lunged, his small fists pounding a guard's leg, his shout raw. "Get off! Him!" The guard kicked back, sending Jordan sprawling, his 12-year-old body skidding, a groan escaping as he hit the wall. Sarah stirred, her voice a weak croak. "Stop it!" The guards ignored her, their batons a blur, Kessler's sneer, a racist mask as he yanked Malik's arms, snapping cuffs back on, the metal biting deeper than before. The guards dragged them out, Malik stumbling, Aaliyah scooped up by a wiry rookie, her sobs piercing the gas-choked air. Jordan hauled by his shirt, his burner phone lost, its feed dead. The terminal corridor stretched cold and narrow. White, walls smeared with grime, the faint hum of Flight 891 a ghost behind them. Nia's voice echoed from ahead, her cuffs rattling, her 5'6" frame thrashing as the lean cop shoved her into a holding bay, her glasses gone, her fury a beacon. "Malik! Kids!" she screamed. Her nurse's calm shattered, her side bruised purple from Vanessa's cart. The family reunited in a concrete box, 10 by 10, 65 degrees inside, a single bulb flickering overhead, their cuffs a chorus of clinks as guards shoved them together. Victor Langston's face flickered on a wall-mounted screen, a live video call from the jet bridge, his sleek gray suit pristine, his hazel eyes glinting with cold triumph, his voice cut through, smooth and sharp, a blade in the silence. "This ends now. A public lesson for troublemakers." The screen split, showing Kessler's gun drawn, its barrel aimed at Malik's chest, the cop's sneer a death sentence, Aaliyah's scream a shattering cry. Nia spat at the floor, her defiance afire, her voice a snarl as she lunged at Kessler, her cuffed hand swinging. "You're a coward." The lean cop yanked her back, her shoulder twisting, pain flashing across her face, but her eyes burned, locked on Victor's smug grin. Outside, the terminal buzzed, passengers from the plane spilling onto the tarmac, their phones a forest of lights, live stream surging despite Victor's blackout. The bearded man's feed hit 4 million, his shout raw. They're gonna kill them. The green sweater woman wept, her stream a tear-streaked plea, the lanky guy's fist a rallying cry. The teenage girls broadcast a global roar at 6 million views. A mob formed, 68 souls turned into hundreds, locals joining, their chants. Justice, justice, shaking the night, their fists pounding the terminal's glass doors. The plane sat grounded, its engines cold. Boise's small airport a battlefield as tires screeched, protesters blocking runways, grounding all flights. Jordan scrambled to his feet, his 12-year-old mind racing, his voice a rasp through the gas's sting. They're watching us. He pointed at the screen. Victor's feed now hijacked by his earlier hack. A faint glitch looping the family's plea. Nia's eyes flashed, her nurse's precision cutting through despair. Her whisper, fierce, "We've got the world." Malik nodded, his burned thighs a fire he ignored, his 6'2" strength surging as he faced Kessler, his voice steady. "You'll lose this." Kessler laughed, a harsh bark, his gun steady, his finger twitching. "Not today." The rookie tightened his grip on Aaliyah, her small frame shaking, her sobs a plea, her 8-year-old voice breaking. "Daddy, I'm scared." Vanessa stormed in, her navy uniform crisp, her blonde bun glinting, her red nails clawing the air as she shoved past Sarah, who slumped against the wall, blood matting her hair. "Shoot them," Vanessa hissed, her smirk a crown, her panic twisting into rage as the mob's chants grew louder, glass cracking outside. Victor's voice sharpened, his calm fraying. "Do it anyway. End this." Kessler's gun rose, its barrel inches from Malik's heart, his sneer a racist vow, his finger curling on the trigger. Nia threw herself forward, her cuffed hands a shield, her scream raw. "No!" A shot rang out, grazing Malik's arm, blood blooming red against his shirt, his 6'2" frame staggering, pain a white-hot spike. But he stayed upright, his roar a defiance. The mob breached the terminal, glass shattering, their shouts a tidal wave as they stormed security, fists and feet toppling guards, their phones filming every second. The bearded man led, his bulk a battering ram, his voice booming. "Save them!" The green sweater woman followed, her tears a war cry, the lanky guy swinging a chair, the teenage girl's stream hitting 7 million, a global scream shaking Boise's night. Kessler spun, his gun wavering, his buzz-cut head snapping toward, the chaos his sneer faltering. Victor's screen flickered, his hazel eyes widening, his voice a snarl. "Hold them!" Vanessa shrieked, her red nails clawing Kessler's arm, her panic exploding. "Shoot, you idiot!" Malik clutched his arm, blood dripping, his burned thighs afire as he pulled Aaliyah close, her small frame trembling, her sobs a heartbeat, against his chest. Jordan darted to Nia, his 12-year-old grit a spark, his voice sharp. "They're coming for us!" Sarah crawled forward, her blood-streaked face pale, her whisper fierce. "Hold on!" The mob's roar grew, boots pounding the corridor, their fists smashing locks, their live streams a multiplying army. Kessler's gun shook, his finger slipping, the second shot grazing Malik's shoulder, blood soaking his sleeve, his 6'2" strength faltering, his vision blurring. Nia caught him, her cuffed hands steady, her nurse's calm a rock, her voice a vow. "We're not dying here." The holding bay's door buckled, the mob's tide crashing in, their hands tearing it wide, their shouts a thunderclap. "Freedom! Freedom!" As they overwhelmed the guards, Kessler's gun clattering, his buzz-cut frame tackled, his sneer buried under fists. Victor's feed cut out, his sleek suit a ghost as he vanished from the screen, his COO pal's line dead, his checkmate unraveling. Vanessa spun, her smirk collapsing, her blonde bun unraveling as she bolted, her red nails clawing air, her retreat a desperate sprint. The mob surged, a human wave, their phones filming, the bearded man lifting Aaliyah, the green sweater woman, freeing Nia's cuffs, the lanky guy uncuffing Malik, the teenage girl's stream of victory cry at 8 million. Malik stood, his burned thighs afire, his arm and shoulder bleeding, his 6'2" frame swaying but unbroken, Aaliyah in his arms, Nia at his side, Jordan's grin a spark. Sarah slumped, her blood pooling, her sacrifice a cost they'd repay. The mob parted, their cheers a shield. Boise's terminal a battlefield won. Victor's trap shattered. Vanessa's reign teetering, the world's eyes a weight that crushed their foes. Blood stained the floor, a testament to the cost. But the Jacksons breathed, their fight a flame that wouldn't die. A coin toss between salvation and slaughter flipped to life. For now. Malik Jackson staggered to his feet in the shattered holding bay. His burned thighs a searing ache, blood dripping from his grazed arm and shoulder, staining the Boise terminal's cold concrete, 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Aaliyah clung to him, her 8-year-old frame trembling, her sobs softening as the bearded man set her down, his bulk a gentle shield. Naya stood beside Malik, her cuffs gone, her bruised side throbbing, her 5'6" strength unbroken as the green sweater. Woman freed her wrists, her tears a quiet thank you. Jordan grinned, his 12-year-old grit a spark, his braids swinging as the lanky guy uncuffed him, his burner phone lost, but its echo roaring at 9 million views. Sarah Miles slumped nearby, her blood-streaked brow a testament, her brown, ponytail matted, her green eyes flickering with pain and relief. The mob surged around them, 100 strong, their fists and phones a victorious tide, glass crunching underfoot as Boise's night shook with their chants. Kessler lay pinned, his buzz-cut head bloodied, his sneer gone as passengers pummeled him, their rage a reckoning for his gun's threat. The lean cop sprawled unconscious, her ponytail askew, the wiry rookie fleeing down the corridor, his shouts lost in the chaos. Vanessa Reed stumbled back, her navy uniform torn, her blonde bun unraveling, her red nails clawing air as the teenage girl tackled her, her hoodie a blur, her scream fierce. "You're done, lady!" Vanessa shrieked, her smirk collapsing, her arms flailing as the mob closed in, their hands tearing at her, her authority a shredded rag. Malik's 6'2" frame swayed, his burned legs trembling, but his voice cut through, steady and raw. "Enough! Let her face it!" The mob paused, their fists hovering, their phones filming. Vanessa's sobs a pitiful sound as they dragged her to the center, her knees hitting the floor, her red nails scraping concrete. Victor Langston's feed had cut out, his sleek gray, suit a ghost on the jet bridge, his hazel eyes absent as his COO pal's line went dead, his empire cracking. The mob parted for the Jacksons, their cheers a shield. "Heroes! Heroes!" Their live stream spiking, the bearded man's feed at 5 million, the green sweater woman's tears a rallying cry, the lanky guys shout a victory hymn, the teenage girls stream a global roar at 10 million. Naya steadied Malik, her nurse's touch firm, her voice a whisper. "We made it." Aaliyah hugged her leg, her small voice soft. "Are we safe now, Mommy?" Malik nodded, his blood-soaked sleeve sticking to his arm, his burned thighs a fire he ignored, his software engineer's mind already plotting justice. He limped forward, the mob's eyes on him, his 6'2" presence a battered beacon. Jordan darted to a busted intercom, his 12-year-old tech-savvy flaring, hot-wiring it with a guard's dropped radio, his grin sharp as he handed Malik the mic. Malik's voice boomed, plane-wide, terminal-wide, a thunderclap of truth. "Victor, Langston framed us, planted drugs, ordered our deaths. Vanessa burned me, lied, and they covered it. We're alive because you fought. Don't let them forget." The words struck, a digital bomb, passengers gasping, their phones flashing, the world waking to Victor's rot. The intercom crackled again, a new voice cutting through, crisp and official, a radio patch from the airline's HQ. "This is Director Evans. Vanessa Reed is terminated, effective immediately, for misconduct on Flight 891. Vanessa's head snapped up, her sobs turning to wails, her blonde hair a wild tangle, her red nails clawing her face as passengers cheered, a roar shaking the terminal's cracked walls. "Fired! Fired!" they chanted, the bearded man pumping his fist, the green sweater woman clapping, the lanky guy whistling, the teenage girl's streams spiking to 11 million, a public execution of Vanessa's career, her disgrace alive. Spectacle. Malik's arm tightened around Aaliyah, his burned thighs steadying, his voice low. "That's step one." Nia pulled Jordan close, her bruised side aching, her glasses lost but her vision clear, her nurse's calm a steel thread. "They're scared now," she said, her whisper a vow, her eyes scanning the mob, their phones a multiplying army. Online, The airline's stock plummeted, a 20% drop in minutes. Hashtags trending. Boycott. The sky. Justice for Jacksons. Protests erupting in Atlanta, Seattle, New York. A nation raging at the racism laid bare. Sarah stirred, her blood pooling, her voice a croak as she sat up, her green eyes glinting. "You did it." Malik knelt beside her, his bloodied hand on her shoulder, his gratitude heavy. "We did." Aaliyah giggled, her small hand in his, her fear easing. The mob's warmth a blanket. The cops retreated, their gray vests vanishing into the terminal's depths. Kessler's limp form dragged off, the lean cop stirring but ignored. The rookie, long gone. Victor's absence loomed, his sleek suit a specter, his COO pal abandoning. Ship as the airline buckled, lawsuits piling up online, a billion-dollar crash unfolding live. The mob hugged the Jacksons, their cheers a symphony. Malik's 6'2" frame a battered pillar, Nia's 5'6" strength a rock, Jordan's 12-year-old grin a spark, Aaliyah's 8-year-old hope a light. They'd won. A fleeting triumph snatched from death's jaws, Vanessa's sobs a soundtrack to their victory. The world's eyes a weight that crushed their foes. Malik leaned into Nia, his burned thighs trembling, his blood-soaked arm heavy, his voice a whisper. "We're free." She nodded, her bruised side a dull ache, her hand squeezing his, her resolve a mirror. For now. Jordan hugged them both, his 12-year-old defiance afire, his voice sharp. "They'll pay more." Aaliyah giggled again, her small frame relaxing, her fear fading, the mob's embrace a shield. The terminal buzzed, glass crunching, phones flashing, the airline's ruin a digital storm, Boise a battlefield they'd conquered. Vanessa wept, her Navy uniform a rag, her red nails clawing air, her firing a public lash she couldn't dodge, passengers jeering their triumph a wave. Then the intercom crackled again, a faint hiss slicing the cheers, Victor's voice slithering back cold and sharp, a ghost in the static. "You'll pay in Seattle." The words hung, a venomous promise, his sleek suit unseen but his hazel eyes felt, a predator retreating but not broken. The mob froze, their cheers faltering, phones tilting, the bearded man's brow furrowing, the green sweater woman's gasp soft, the lanky guy's fist clenching, the teenage girl's stream trembling. At 12 million, Malik's jaw tightened, his burned thighs afire, his bloodied arm tensing, his 6'2" frame straightening, his voice a growl. "Let him try." Nia's eyes flashed, her nurse's calm a blade, her whisper fierce. "He won't win." Jordan's grin faded, his 12-year-old mind spinning, his voice low. "What's he got left?" Sarah sat up fully, her bloodied brow a badge, her green eyes narrowing, her croak firm. "Trouble." The mob rallied, their chants resuming. "Justice! Justice!" Their phones a fortress, the airline stock tanking 30%, protests swelling nationwide, a reckoning Victor couldn't outrun. Malik hugged his family, his burned thighs steadying, his blood-soaked sleeve a banner, his software engineer's brain plotting the next move. Vanessa's sobs faded, her firing a victory. But Victor's threat loomed, a shadow stretching to Seattle, the plane lifting off again, danger a passenger they couldn't shake. The terminal settled, glass glinting, blood staining, the mob's warmth a fleeting shield as the Jacksons stood, unbroken but battered, their win a fragile crown. Malik's 6'2" strength held, Nia's 5'6" resolve a rock, Jordan's 12-year-old fire a spark, Aaliyah's 8-year-old hope a light, Sarah's sacrifice a cost they'd carry. The world cheered, a digital army, the airlines, ruin a testament, Vanessa's disgrace a public grave. But Victor's voice lingered, a noose tightening, a war unfinished, the flight resuming with a promise of payback they'd face head-on. Malik Jackson sat strapped into row 32, his burned thighs a throbbing inferno under his blood-soaked jeans, the cabin air a tense 60 degrees Fahrenheit as Flight 891 climbed back to 35,000 feet. Nia nestled, Aaliyah in her lap, her bruised side aching, her 5'6" frame a steady rock despite the chaos they'd escaped in Boise, her glasses still lost to the fray. Jordan slumped by the window, his 12-year-old hands empty without his burner phone, his braid still, his defiance simmering after sparking a global storm, now at 13 million views. The mob's cheers faded behind them. Boise's shattered terminal a battlefield 1. Vanessa Reed's firing a public lash, but Victor Langston's voice, "You'll pay in Seattle," echoed in Malik's ears, a venomous vow that twisted their victory into a fragile thread. His 6'2" frame tensed, blood crusting his grazed arm and shoulder, his software engineer's mind racing to decode the next strike. The plane leveled off, the hum of engines a deceptive calm. 68 passengers settling into an uneasy hush, their phones dimmed but their eyes sharp, the bearded man rubbing his knuckles, the green sweater woman clutching her bag, the lanky guy staring ahead, the teenage girl's fingers twitching for a signal lost. Sarah Miles sat in row 28, her blood-matted ponytail a badge, her green eyes hollow after her sacrifice, her firing a quiet rumor rippling through the crew. The intercom crackled, Captain Paul Grayson's voice droning, "We're en route to Seattle. Remain seated." His tone flat, a man broken by Victor's pull, his betrayal a stain from Boise to here. Malik's jaw clenched, his burned thighs afire, his bloodied arm await, his whisper low. "He's not done." Nia nodded, her nurse's calm ablade, her voice soft. "We'll be ready." 30 minutes in, the cabin jolted, a sharp dip as the plane banked, the seatbelt sign flashing on, passengers gasping, a tray clattering in the galley. Paul's voice returned, strained now, a crack in his facade. "We've received a bomb threat. FAA's investigating." Malik's stomach sank, his 6'2" frame tensing, his burned legs protesting as he gripped the armrest, Victor's shadow stretching long. Nia's eyes widened, her hand tightening on Aaliyah, her whisper fierce. "This is him." Jordan sat up, his 12-year-old mind clicking, his voice sharp. "They're framing us again." The cabin buzzed, passengers whispering, the bearded man muttering, "No way." The green sweater woman clutching her chest, the lanky guy's fist clenching, the teenage girl's gaze darting, signal still dead. The forward door swung open, 3 FAA agents storming in, their navy jackets stark, their badges glinting, their faces grim as they zeroed on row 32. The lead agent, a tall woman with a severe bob named Carter, barked, "Malik Jackson, you're under arrest for terrorism." Her voice sliced the air, a lie forged in Victor's venom, her hand on her cuffs, her gray eyes cold. Malik stood, his burned thighs screaming, his bloodied arm trembling, his voice steady. "That's bullshit. Check the bags, it's a setup." Carter's lip curled, her cuffs snapping onto his wrists, the metal biting fresh scars. Her growl, low. "We found explosives, your prince." Nia surged up, Aaliyah tumbling to the seat, her 5'6" fury a wall. "He's been with us, you're lying." The second agent, a stocky man with a buzz cut, grabbed Nia, his cuffs clicking, his voice rough. "You too, ma'am. Accomplice." Aaliyah screamed, "Mommy, no!" Her small hands reaching, her 8-year-old frame shaking as the third agent, a wiry rookie, scooped her and Jordan away, their kicks useless, their shouts piercing. "Let us go!" Jordan yelled, his 12-year-old grit a spark snuffed, his braids swinging as he thrashed. Passengers erupted, their phones flashing despite the blackout, the bearded man shouting, "This is insane!" The green sweater woman wept, her voice breaking, "They're innocent." The lanky guy stood, his yell raw. "Stop this!" The teenage girl filmed, her stream dead, but her lens a witness, her gasp soft. "They're framing them!" Carter dragged Malik forward, his burned thighs afire, his bloodied arm a dead weight, the galley curtain swinging shut as Nia followed, her cuffs rattling, her bruised side a dull ache, her nurse's calm fracturing. The kids were hauled to the rear, Aaliyah's sobs a haunting echo, Jordan's defiance a muffled roar, the wiry agent's grip iron as he locked them in a crew nook, 62 degrees inside. A steel cage. The cabin turned hostile, passengers booing, their phones a futile army, the bearded man pounding his seat, the green sweater woman's tears a plea, the lanky guy's shout a curse, the teenage girl's lens a silent cry. Victor's fake threat. Worked, his planted drugs from Boise now a bomb, his frame-up a death sentence, the FAA his pawns. Vanessa strutted from the galley, her navy uniform patched, her blonde bun retied, her red nails glinting as she smirked, reinstated by Victor's pull, her firing reversed in the chaos. "Told you you'd lose," she hissed, her voice a venomous gloat, her smirk a crown reclaimed, her stride a taunt as she brushed past Malik, her shoulder clipping his bloodied arm, pain flaring. Nia's eyes burned, her cuffed hands clenching, her whisper fierce. "You're nothing." Vanessa laughed, a sharp bark, her red nails tapping her radio, her power flexing as the agents nodded, her allies' strings tightening the noose. Malik's 6'2" frame swayed, his burned thighs buckling, his voice a growl. "This won't hold." Sarah slipped from row 28, her blood-matted ponytail swinging, her green eyes sharp as she darted to Malik, her whisper urgent. "They fired me, but I've got this." She pressed a USB into his cuffed hands, her fingers slick with blood, her voice a rasp. Victor's call to the COO, recorded it in Boise. Malik's burned fingers closed around it, his software, engineer's brain sparking, his nod heavy. "You're a damn hero." She retreated, her limp a cost, her sacrifice a slim chance as Carter yanked him on, her gray eyes blind to truth. The galley curtain closed, Nia beside him, her cuffs a mirror, her nurse's resolve a rock, her whisper a vow. "We'll use it." Malik twisted the USB, his burned thighs afire, his bloodied arm trembling as he slipped it to Nia, her cuffed hands fumbling but steady, her nurse's precision a lifeline. She tucked it into her pocket, her voice low. "Jordan'll know what to do." The plane descended, Seattle's skyline glinting below, 500 miles per hour slowing, the cabin rocking as passengers turned, their boos a chorus, the bearded man's fist a drum, the green sweater woman's sob a plea, the lanky guy's curse a roar, the teenage girl's lens a ghost. The FAA agents hauled Malik and Nia off, the jet bridge a cold tunnel, Boise's mob a memory, Victor's frame up a guillotine, Vanessa's gloat a lash they'd endured. Aaliyah and Jordan huddled in the nook, the wiry agent's shadow looming, their small frames trembling, their shouts muffled as the plane taxied to Seattle's gate. Malik stumbled, his burned thighs failing, his bloodied arm a dead weight. Carter's grip iron as she dragged him on, Nia's cuffs rattling beside him, her bruised side a fire she ignored. The USB burned in her pocket, a slim hope. Victor's voice a noose tightening, Vanessa's smirk a taunt, the passenger's rage a fading echo. The terminal loomed, agents swarming, defeat a shroud they'd fight to shred, their family torn, their wind snatched, a final descent into a trap they'd claw out of or die trying. Malik Jackson stumbled onto Seattle's jet bridge, his burned thighs a blazing torment under his blood-crusted jeans, the air a sharp 66 degrees Fahrenheit, the hum of Flight 891 fading behind him. FAA Agent Carter's grip tightened on his cuffed wrists, her severe bob swaying as she shoved him forward, her gray eyes blind to the truth. Nia staggered beside him, her bruised side a dull ache, her 5'6" frame unbowed despite her cuffs, the USB from Sarah burning in her pocket, a fragile lifeline against Victor Langston's frame-up. The terminal buzzed ahead, reporters swarming like hornets, their cameras flashing, their shouts a chaotic roar. "Terrorist family caught!" A lie spun from Boise's planted drugs now twisted into a bomb threat. Malik's 6'2", strength wavered, his bloodied arm and shoulder throbbing. But his software engineer's mind locked onto the endgame, his voice a rasp. "They're watching, Nia. We've got this." Carter dragged them into the terminal, a cavern of glass and steel, 68 degrees inside, the crowd parting as microphones thrust forward, lenses glinting, the world's eyes await Victor. Couldn't outrun. Nia's cuffed hands fumbled the USB, her nurse's precision steady as she slipped it to a teenage boy in a hoodie, his phone raised, his gasp soft as he caught it, his thumbs flying to plug it in. "Jordan's hack," she whispered, her voice a vow, her bruised side ignored, her resolve a rock. The boy nodded, his screen flaring, Victor's voice spilling out. "Plant it. Drugs. End them in Boise." A confession recorded by Sarah, a bomb detonating in real time. The hashtag Justice for Jackson spiking to 15 million views. A global scream shredding the lie. Reporters froze, their cameras pivoting. The boys' feed going viral. Victor's sleek gray suit a ghost unmasked. His hazel eyes nowhere to hide. The airline's COO resigned mid-broadcast. A news ticker flashing. Exec quits amid scandal. His betrayal of the Jacksons a billion-dollar collapse. The stock tanking 40%. Lawsuits flooding in from Atlanta to Boise. Carter's grip faltered, her gray eyes widening, her cuffs loosening as a second agent uncuffed Nia. His buzz cut bowing, his mutter low. We got it wrong. Malik's burned thighs steadied, his bloodied arm trembling as he pulled free. His 6'2" frame a battered pillar, his voice booming. You damn right you did. The mob from Boise echoed here, passengers spilling off the plane. Their phones a forest of truth. The bearded man's shout raw. The green sweater woman's tears a victory. The lanky guy's fist a salute. The teenage girl's stream a triumph at 16 million. Vanessa Reed strutted from the jet bridge, her navy uniform patched, her blonde bun tight, her red nails glinting as she smirked, reinstated but blind to the shift. You're still nothing, she hissed, her gloat a taunt. Her stride halting as cops swarmed her, their badges flashing, their voices sharp. Vanessa Reed, you're under arrest, assault, fraud, conspiracy. Her smirk collapsed, her blonde hair a wild tangle as she thrashed, her red nails clawing air, her wail piercing. No, this is wrong. Handcuffs snapped, her firing final. Now her career ash, passengers jeering. Rot in jail. The bearded man spitting, the green sweater woman cheering. The lanky guy laughing, the teenage girl filming her downfall, a public grave dug live. Malik's burned thighs held, his bloodied arm a banner, his whisper fierce. That's justice. Nia pulled Aaliyah and Jordan close as they stumbled from the plane, the wiry agent retreating, his shadow gone, their small frames trembling but alive, Aaliyah's 8-year-old eyes wide, her bear lost forever, Jordan's 12-year-old grin, faint, his braids still. We did it, Dad, he said, his voice a spark, his tech-savvy a torch that burned Victor's web. Malik hugged them, his 6'2" strength a shield, his burned thighs a fire he ignored, his bloodied arm a cost, his software engineer's brain savoring the flip. Nia's bruised side ached, her nurse's calm a rock, her voice soft. We're together. The family stood, unbroken but scarred, reporters circling, their questions a hum. How'd you survive? Their cameras a spotlight on a win too raw to celebrate. The airline crumbled, a news ticker flashing. Carrier bankrupt, amid outrage, a billion-dollar ruin, protests nationwide, a reckoning Victor couldn't dodge. Malik and Nia sued, their lawyer cousin Jamal filing mid-broadcast, winning millions in hours, a fortune they'd never spend on flights again. Trust shattered like Boise's glass. Jordan's eyes hardened, his 12-year-old soul radicalized, his whisper sharp. I'll fight this forever. Aaliyah clung to Nia, her 8-year-old heart traumatized, her voice small. No more planes, Mommy. Malik's burned thighs steadied, his bloodied arm a weight, his nod heavy. We're done flying. The sky had betrayed them, a lesson etched in scars, their victory a hollow crown. Victor fled, his sleek gray suit a rumor, his hazel eyes unseen, a warrant issued as he vanished, his voice a vow from hiding. I'll be back. A predator, wounded but alive, his revenge a shadow stretching beyond Seattle. The terminal buzzed, cops cuffing Vanessa, her wails a fading echo, her red nails clawing concrete, her disgrace a public lash she'd carry. Passengers hugged the Jacksons, their phones a shield, the bearded man's grip firm, the green sweater, woman's tears warm, the lanky guy's nod silent. The teenage girls stream a bittersweet hymn at 17 million. Sarah limped forward, her blood-matted ponytail a badge, her green eyes glinting, her voice a croak. Worth it. Malik squeezed her shoulder, his burned fingers tender, his gratitude a debt. You saved us. Malik led his family out, his burned thighs a limp, his bloodied arm a banner, Nia's bruised side a cost, Jordan's radicalized spark a fire, Aaliyah's trauma a wound, their millions a shield they didn't want. The terminal doors swung wide, Seattle's night a crisp 60 degrees, The crowd parting, their cheers a bittersweet roar. Heroes, heroes, their phones a fading army, the airline's ruin a testament, Vanessa's arrest a justice, Victor's escape a thorn. Malik's 6'2" frame stood tall. Nia's 5'6" resolve a rock, their eyes meeting, a silent vow to heal, to fight, to live. The world cheered, a digital tide, but the Jacksons walked away, unbroken, but forever, changed, a family forged in fire, a win too costly to savor. They stepped onto the pavement, the airport's lights blurring, their shadows stretching long, a taxi waiting, its engine a soft hum, a path to ground they'd never leave. Malik's burned thighs eased, his bloodied arm resting, his voice a whisper. We're done with heights. Nia nodded, her bruised side a memory, her hand in his, her nurse's calm a balm. Home's enough. Jordan's 12-year-old eyes scanned the dark, his radicalized heart a drum, his whisper fierce. They'll see us again. Aaliyah's 8-year-old hand gripped Nia's, her trauma a shadow, her voice small. No more bad people, right? The taxi pulled away, Seattle fading, Victor's threat a ghost, their scars a map, their justice a bittersweet dawn they'd carry forever. Flight attendant kicks black family off plane, 7 minutes later, she's fired in front of passengers. Is a gut-wrenching tale of resilience against systemic racism. The Jacksons, Malik, Nia, Jordan, and Aaliyah, faced relentless injustice. From Vanessa Reed's scalding assault to Victor Langston's lethal frame-up, yet their fight exposed a rotten core. The first lesson? Courage can turn victims into victors. Malik's calm defiance and Nia's fierce resolve showed that standing up, even in a confined jet at 35,000 feet, sparks change. Jordan's tech-savvy uprising proved kids can wield power, while Aaliyah's trauma reminds us innocence pays the steepest price. Second, collective action matters. Passengers evolved from silent watchers to a mob that shattered Vanessa's reign, proving unity can topple tyranny. Third, systemic bias bends truth. Victors pull flipped allies like Captain Paul and rigged the FAA, showing how deep racism runs. But the USB, Sarah's sacrifice, flipped it back, underlining that evidence and allies can dismantle lies. Finally, victory's bittersweet. The Jacksons won millions, Vanessa's career burned, and the airline crashed, yet Victor's escape and their scars linger, a reminder justice isn't clean. This story screams, don't bow to hate, but brace for its cost. So, what hits you hardest? Comment below. Did Malik's grit or Vanessa's downfall get you? If you're fired up against racism, hit like and subscribe for more raw tales. Share this to wake others up. Thanks for riding this roller coaster with us. Stay strong, stay loud, and may your fights find justice too.